before you all inevitably ask, no, I did not also watch Barbie. Now that we got that out of the way, I finally saw Oppenheimer. Yes, I'm aware I'm a little late to this party, but I've been busy. But either way, I finally got around to seeing it, and clearly I'm not alone because people have been raving about this movie. It has gotten universal acclaim from both critics and audiences, and it is making bank at the box office. Honestly, I don't know how much the whole Barbenheimer thing had to do with it, but either way, it is doing really well. I'm pretty sure it's already like the 5th highest grossing movie of the year, which is surprising because you don't really see that for like a historical war drama like this. So I was definitely curious to check it out, though to be perfectly honest, part of me was a little hesitant because this is a World War II movie directed by Christopher Nolan, much like a movie he made a few years ago, Dunkirk, which I know also got universal acclaim, but personally I was not a fan of that movie. I thought it was boring and hard to follow, but this definitely looked more my style because it was more of a historical drama rather than a straightforward war movie, and I'm usually not a fan of war movies, and I am really glad I kept an open mind because hot damn was this movie good. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I don't know if I quite overly loved it like a lot of other people did, but I did think it was a great time overall and a very high quality product. Of course, for the few of you that haven't seen it, I should probably reiterate that this is, again, a Christopher Nolan movie, and Christopher Nolan tends to have a very distinct style that this movie fits into very well for two main reasons. One, it is very dialogue heavy. Nolan films are known for being like 90% dialogue, and this movie is no exception. There is a lot of talking in this movie, so if you're someone who doesn't really enjoy that stuff, you're definitely not gonna like this movie. And the second reason is, at least early on, a lot of the story is told in a non-linear fashion. The first act or so of this movie can basically be summed up in 3 parts. Of course, it follows the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who made the atomic bomb in World War II, and we basically jump between 3 separate time points. One is before he made the bomb, like the process of going through it. The second is like a brief meeting that he has with some other government people after the war, and the third is a trial discussing like the aftermath long after the war and his political stance, mainly led by this guy named Lewis Strauss, who is played by Robert Downey Jr. But even then, the levels of flashbacks definitely changes throughout the film. I think this movie can pretty much be summed up into 3 acts. The first act is the backstory, where again we get glimpses into the future of like the meeting and the trial and stuff, but it is primarily like laying the foundation for Oppenheimer's life and who he is and stuff. The second phase is about like the making of the bomb, and for the most part that is pretty straightforward. Like there are very few flashbacks or jumps ahead. It does happen occasionally, but for the most part we're just going in a linear fashion. And then the third one is the aftermath of the bomb, where we go fully in depth with the meeting and the trial, which again we can get more into later. It primarily opens with Oppenheimer in college, where he was just beginning to study physics. Part of that was done in the school, where he had some issues with his professors, and parts of that were later down the line. After he graduated, he began studying more in various European countries. Like he went to Germany, he went to Hungary, he went to Russia, which of course US was not exactly friendly with many of these at the time, because this is like prior to World War II, but of course that more so comes into play later. Either way, this is just like establishing the foundation of who he is, like what he studies and stuff. But we also learn he is a bit too friendly with a certain party that wasn't too popular in America at the time, the Communist Party, where we quickly learn that he is very much a womanizer. Like, he definitely sleeps around with a lot of people and stuff, mostly in particular with this openly communist woman named Jean, as well as a woman named Kitty, who was part of the Communist Party, but since ended up leaving. He winds up getting her pregnant while she cheats on her husband, and she gets pregnant from it, so she and her husband divorce, and then the two of them get married. So, seems classy, but yeah, if you know Oppenheimer's life, you know that doesn't really go very well, as he winds up having another affair with Jean, the woman who is still a communist. And yes, just heads up for some of you, there are sex scenes in this movie. There is nudity, so yeah, this might not be the best movie to watch with your parents. While this movie is very dialogue heavy, thankfully the writing is absolutely fantastic, and without a doubt, the best thing about this movie is the acting. You can tell every single actor is giving 1,000,000%. I can guarantee this movie is going to be nominated for multiple Oscars, and it's definitely going to win at least a few of them. I could see Cillian Murphy at least being nominated for Best Actor. I'd be shocked if Robert Downey Jr. wasn't nominated. Like, it is absolutely fantastic through and throughout. There is not a single bad performance in this movie, which is impressive given how absolutely massive this cast is. After his studies in Europe, Oppenheimer begins teaching at a university, and this is where he meets Louis Strauss, though he really doesn't come into play too much during his early life. He really comes more into play later in, like, the flash forwards and stuff, but again, we can get a little more into that later. When he's teaching at his university, he is approached to learn about the Manhattan Project because the US is in World War II, and them and Germany are both beginning to study nuclear weaponry. So, of course, Oppenheimer is placed as the leader of the project to make the bomb. Again, any of you history buffs know that. Personally, I'm not hugely experienced in World War II history. I know a little bit, but I think this is mostly historically accurate, but though I assume you big history buffs will be like, oh no, this is wrong, no, this is wrong, but either way, there was nothing blatantly false in this movie, at least as far as I'm aware. As I said before, the second act of this movie is very linear. It is primarily about the making of the bomb, the various people that come into play with it, the people that join, the people that leave, what everyone has different inputs for it, and Oppenheimer himself's struggle with it. It is a very complicated process, but, you know, making a nuclear bomb isn't exactly straightforward, so that's not too surprising. But it is very engaging throughout. Like, this movie knows how to keep you fascinated. You want to see where this is all gonna go, even if you already know, because, yeah, spoiler alert for a history movie, they make the bomb, and they set it off. And I really need to talk about the scene where they set off the bomb in particular, because holy shit, that might be one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever. It is done absolutely perfectly, from the characters' performances, to the writing, to the way it's paced, and the effect looks absolutely amazing. Like, I'm fairly certain Nolan did not use CG for the explosion, and god damn, is it well done. Take notes, Michael Bay. This is how you do an explosion. You feel the weight of this bomb, from the effect itself to the sound, the way the characters react. It is done absolutely perfectly. The theater was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop after that thing went off. Of course, all that was just testing of the bomb. We don't actually see the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That happens off screen, but honestly, we don't really need to see that. What we do need to see, though, is Oppenheimer's discussion with Harry Truman afterwards, and this is where he starts to have some regret, because he begins to wonder if America, or really any country in the world, should have that kind of destructive power, especially since, yeah, they might have been able to deal with, like, Germany and Japan and stuff, but now Russia might be able to get their hands on that power, and no one wants that. It's a discussion that is sadly still relevant, even to this day. But now it's time to talk about my biggest issue with this movie, the runtime. This movie is 3 hours long, and for the most part, it doesn't feel that bad, but the last 30 or 40 minutes or so, I was really starting to feel the runtime. Like, genuinely, just out of curiosity, I checked how much time was left in the movie after the bomb went off. There's still a full hour left, and by the end of it, I was definitely, like, squirming in my seat, getting ready to go. Like, alright, come on, keep going, can we end now, can we go now? I was definitely enjoying what I saw, but by the end, I was really starting to feel the runtime. I was like, okay, can this please end soon? But that's not to say the aftermath of the bomb is bad, because this is when we get into the third act of the movie, where we go fully in depth with, like, the meeting and the trial, and what these are about. Won't spoil too much. Again, history people probably know what happens, but either way, Strauss wants to get rid of Oppenheimer because he's afraid of the stance he has in political discussions. He's afraid he's gonna be like, no, we can't make any more bombs, like, we can't have this kind of power, but of course, Russia might have that power, so we can't be safe. That's Strauss's opinion anyway, and I like how you do understand both of their perspectives, but of course, this leads into a meeting where they discuss Oppenheimer's past with the Communist Party, and they basically accuse him of being a communist, and then we get the trial where it goes fully in depth with more government people and stuff, and what I find really interesting is that the majority of this movie is in color, but the trial is filmed in black and white. Not only do I think that's a fairly interesting stylistic choice, but it also helps distinguish what scenes are happening then and what scenes aren't, because there are a few other, like, time periods that get thrown in there, and again, another small complaint I have with this movie is that sometimes the nonlinear storytelling can get a little confusing. For the most part, I was able to follow it fine, but there were a few moments where I was like, wait, when is this supposed to take place again? Again, minor nitpicks, but it did kind of nip at me a little bit. Overall, this movie was fantastic. It was a very interesting story, told in a very engaging way. The writing is great, the acting is phenomenal across the board, the effects are insanely impressive, the sound design is phenomenal. If they could just maybe cut down the runtime a little bit towards the end, I might have said this was the best movie of the year so far. But either way, it is still up there for me. Really enjoyed it, high recommendation. It is a super high quality movie. Glad to see it's getting both the praise and box office performance it deserves because it is awesome. Oppenheimer earns an 8 out of 10.